Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Manitoba Agriculture Crop Talk webinar. If you have any questions during the presentation today, please type them into the Q&A icon on your Zoom toolbar, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. I'd like to welcome everybody to the October 23rd edition of Crop Talk. And this Crop Talk is going to be, I guess, the end of the spring, summer, and fall edition of Crop Talk. And we'll be going into some winter crop talks, but they won't be starting for a few days. So we'll let you know as to when they're going to be starting again. But today we got a good topic. It's Darren Bond's going to be on, and Darren is farm management specialist, and he's going to be talking about year-end management and Roundup, and it's kind of what we should be looking at with our books wise, getting towards the end of the year, with things we should be considering. I thought it would be a good opportunity for him to go over. There's quite a few different things that we should be looking at, so it'd be a good opportunity to go over that. So I'm glad to have Darren on today. After that, there hasn't been a lot of questions coming in as we're getting closer to the end of the year with crop scouting panel. So we'll deal with those and finish the day off. So with that, I'm going to pass the screen over to Darren, and we'll get started with year-end management.
All right, thanks, Lionel. So I'm just going to rob the screen from you here. So you just stay on the line to make sure that it's all working and you can see everything. All right.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so thanks, Lionel. Appreciate the opportunity here. Going to talk about a few things. Going to talk about the 2024 crop budget, and especially now as we're moving into the 2024 crop year, like Lionel said, moving into the rearview mirror, if you will, talking about what we could do with these budgets and with the focus on grain marketing. Going to speak a little bit about the upcoming 2025 crop year budget and doing those projections. And then I'm going to wrap it up with AgriStability and AgriInvest. And I know it's something that it's top of mind when we get into the winter season, especially when we get closer to year end. Going to talk about some of the forms and then also some changes. And there are changes in both 24 and 25 with both AgriStability and AgriInvest. There's been a little bit of confusion around it. So I'm going to hopefully clear that confusion and we can have a discussion about that. So 2024 crop year. So I always view our budgets as a document that gets updated throughout time. It's not something that we go and we create projections, say like for next year, 2025, we create projections and then we put them to the side of the desk and never come back to them. What we should be doing is as the year progresses and as our projected amounts turn into actual amounts, we should update those budgets into actual dollar sales. And I'll show you the value of that. We can update any grain sales. There's a lot of marketing done before harvest, a lot of pre-sales. So once we do that, once we have sales at harvest time for storage issues and stuff like that, we're getting to that point now where we get a little bit clearer picture of what we have in the bin. And then we're going to boil that down into cost per bushel produced, which is going to help in our marketing. And then it allows us to review the season's winners and losers, because there's always winners and losers every year. Every year can't have a winner on every crop, but it allows us to have that retrospective of what worked, what didn't, what we need to change on a go-forward basis. So this is our cost of production. Again, our 24 one is online. That's what we have, and we're starting to work on our 25 already. So that's where a lot of this information comes from. And I'm going to use CropPlan. It's an Excel-based tool. It allows a producer to put in their own cost of production on a very individualized basis. One of the questions I always get is, well, how do I figure out fixed costs, like the cost for land and equipment? For example, this allows us to put in our actual loan payments, and it will prorate it out into a per acre amount. So then we can start to use that data to make more informed decisions. people can use whatever they want. This one's free. It's the Price is Right, if you will. It's the one that I'm going to just use just to show. But again, feel free to use whatever it is, whether it be pencil, paper, your own spreadsheet, whatever it is. The importance is in doing this, and you'll see why here. So I'm going to just take an example of canola. So we can see here, we have canola, we have 750 acres of canola on this farm example. We can put in our seed costs, we can put in our fertilizer costs, so we can have a cost per acre. And we're building this, and again, as the season progresses, we turn these into actuals. And obviously, we'll have known this by this point in time, so we can put in these numbers for actuals. Keep on going down the list. We can put in our herbicide amount, and what this document and crop plan does, you can just put a basic amount in, or you can actually list out the different chemicals that are used and come up with a cost. My experience is that we start saying, oh, cost is this, cost is that. And then when we actually add up what we actually sprayed or whatever the case may be, and then adding in any conditioners or adjuvants or whatever the case may be, sometimes those costs are a little bit bigger than what we first thought. So again, that's the value in coming up with these actual costs, because if you're just using fictitious numbers, you're just lying to yourself, and now you're not making informed decisions, and that's the challenge with that. So fungicide and insecticide costs are in here as well. And then we get to where we really can use some information. We get into what our costs on a per acre basis is for this example. And we can see here, operating costs are, $435 an acre. Our fixed costs, not shown in these sheets that I've shown you, that's in some other pages, but for this farm, let's just say it's $151 an acre. Fixed costs are quite variable across farms. It's very important to come up with your own amount. High equity farms, so farmers that are later in their farming career, are going to have a less or a lower fixed cost, especially when we're talking about direct cash costs, compared to a farmer that's just starting out. So just knowing what that is very important. We have an ownership withdrawal in here, and they come up with a total cost of $611 on a per acre basis. And let's just say we yielded 45 bushels per acre on this, and where the true value in cost of production is in coming up with break-even price or cost per unit sold. We're going to use bushels. So for operating costs, we're at $9.67. But that total cost here, because again, this money is left the farm, we have to account for it, and we're trying to generate a return on it, obviously. Over total costs, we're at $13.59 per bushel on this fictitious farm using 45 bushels an acre. So at this point in time, we haven't made any grain sales, or we haven't accounted for any grain sales, but we know that we know what our costs are, we know what our yield is, we know what our break-even price, and that is at $13.59, and it allows us to start to make some informed and educated decisions when it comes down to grain marketing. So now we can take some of the sales that we've made and start to see how that impacts profitability, how that also impacts on remaining unpriced inventory. So I'm going to walk through this. So in May, grain canola price was good. We made a sale. Of 10,000 bushels at $14.75 a bushel. At today's prices around $13.50, depending on where you go. That looks like not too bad of a sale. So we did that, and that's about representing, roughly 30% of our sales. So we still have 70% unsold. So using that sale where we actually exceeded our cost of production, which is obviously a good thing, we can see that if we look into our break-even price on the remaining unsold inventory, we've actually drove that down to $13.10 per bushel, because again, we sold above our cost of production. So that makes sense. So if we then say, okay, we're going to take the remaining inventory at $13.50, we have a blended estimated weighted average price for everything on the farm for canola at $13.87. So these numbers do really help, and unfortunately in the grain industry, looks like we're heading to tighter times. It's I think the last few years maybe we haven't had to have as much oversight with our bankers, as much reporting with our bankers, but I think that there'll be coming a time where we need to do this a little bit more. Having something like this to be able to slide across the table when it comes time for the bankers meeting is so powerful, because it shows several things. It shows that you know your cost of production. It shows that you know where your price points are, and it shows how much you've marketed and how much you have remaining to be marketed. And it allows you to do some what if analysis of saying, what if prices go a little bit lower? How does this impact me? Do I still have profitability on the farm? So there's a lot of value to it. And I'm going to show, when the numbers go the other way. These numbers look good, and we're feeling pretty good about ourselves, because when we look at profitability and looking at 750 acres, $9,500 of total profit doesn't seem like a whole lot, but you know what? We still got a profit out of this. We still won. Seeing here that our break even is 44 and our yield is 45, it's really tight, but we're still winning in this example. And this is, again, the value of the numbers. It creates that comfort and confidence in knowing where you stand. It creates the confidence in knowing where potential profit points are for prices. And when we start to see price rallies, we can say, okay, knowing what we know now, knowing how sold or unsold we are, knowing what our break-even costs on a bushel produced is, we can know that at certain price points they make us money, or at certain price points they don't make us money. So let's take a look maybe at a less rosy scenario, and let's drop that yield in canola down to 40 bushels. So from 45 down to 40, and unfortunately, this might be a little bit more representative of what we've seen in the countryside this year. Talked to a lot of producers who were underwhelmed by their canola. Not saying that canola was terrible, but canola just was not quite as good as what they were hoping. Now, I would think back to some old timers I deal with who would say, oh, 40 bushels an acre of canola is a disappointing crop, and they would scoff. But with the cost of everything today, and the potential and the genetic potential within the crops, our cropping practices, our equipment, maybe 40 is a disappointing amount. But we can see here, whatever we feel about that number drives our break-even price. And because it's lower, in this case, our break-even price is now $15.29 per bushel. And that is how impactful and how sensitive yield is to the cost per bushel sold number. So taking that number, and let's just assume that we again sold 1475 canola in May. Now we can start to see, okay, well, how does that drive down our remaining amounts? Because that 1475 is sold under that new break-even amount, it actually drives it up, and we're again moving in this wrong direction. So we can see here that based on our sales, our remaining inventory is now at just over 1550 per bushel, and we can see, based on if it's a 1350 price, that averaged price, it remains at 1392. So I'll get some comments and criticisms about, well, how does this really help me? As if I know I'm losing money, like, how does knowing my break evens, knowing how as I sell into the market, my remaining unpriced inventory break-even amount, changes, how does that help me? Because I don't feel confident in this canola market that I'm going to see this type of a return. And maybe we will, maybe we won't. I'm not sure. These markets, although it seems like we've been rallying lately from the harvest lulls, there's a lot of volatility in these prices, and with some elections on the horizon, both here and mainly south of the border, who knows what's going to happen with some of these prices, right? So the question is, how does knowing this help me when I'm selling at a loss? And the thing is again about making the plan. It's about looking at knowing that, okay, we're looking at generating a little bit of a loss, and in this example, it's say if 1350 is the best we can get, we're looking at around a $2 a bushel loss on that amount. At least then we can plan for that and know that. We also know that if we start to see rallies and we start to see some prices maybe get up to higher amounts, we can look at saying we have maybe an increased impetus to capture some of those rallies. So making those informed decisions are really crucial. And again, it's always better to know than not know, because I always tell producers is that you want to be the one who knows when you got trouble. You don't want to find out first from your banker. So this is where this type of information is very important. And it's actually, I think it actually is kind of neat to do, just to see where you are on this spectrum of break-even price, and how close you are to profitability, or other crops. And this is where reviewing the winners and losers, we can look at some crops, and I'll use crops in my area where, say, oats looked like a pretty decent winner this year because the yields were good and the prices were decent. And again, knowing that allows you to make some informed decisions. So here's the ugly value. If we are starting to lose some money on this 750 acres, we can see that those dollars add up pretty quick, unfortunately. So a little bit about grain marketing. I don't speak a whole lot about grain marketing. There's some really great private industry folks who do that, but I am going to speak a little bit about carrying charges, and just how very easy it is to actually figure that out. So essentially, there's a few things when it comes for the cost to carry: interest, storage, insurance. Mainly it's interest and storage in Manitoba. So if we look at interest costs, it's whatever our operating loan rate is times the value of the grain over 12 to figure out on a per month basis times how many months you're going to store. So in this example, let's say 8% at $13.50 a bushel. And I'm actually just realizing that this morning that the Bank of Canada dropped their rate. So, this might be a little bit high, but insert your number here and we can go from there, right? So 8% at $13.50 over 12 months to come up with a per month basis, or per month cost at 14 months, for example. That's what we're going to store. That's $1.26 bushel. So if we're going to store for 14 months, $1.26 per bushel, it's about 9 cents per bushel per month. That's actually very helpful just to know, is that when we're looking at the far out, or not even the far out, but even if you're looking into deferred deliveries, so December, January, February, March, April, whatever the case may be, we can think that under this circumstance, it's about 9 cents a bushel just to sit on it. That's the opportunity cost. So we need to see that, and I would argue some more for it to be worth our while to hold on to it, right? Storage costs. Now, this depends if you're renting bins or whatever the case may be. Even if a bin sits empty, I'd argue that there's a cost to it just because you've had to have paid for it. But if we're going to use 0.023 cents or $0.023 per bushel per month, and that comes from our grain bin calculator, and that's just an assumed amount. We're not saying that that's the market amount, but under the certain set of circumstances, that is what it is. Or it's about 32 cents per bushel for the 14 months. If we're to add up both of those, it's about 11.3 cents per bushel per month, or $1.58 per bushel for the 14 months. I throw insurance costs in there that would be for stored grain insurance. Not everybody has that, but if you do have that and you pay per monthly, you have to add that in as well. But we can see here, if we're going to look at both interest and storage, 11 cents per bushel per month, we're going to need to get that over and above what the current price is right now. So it's an easy way to look at, how much carry is priced into the market. So one thing, a few other notes, don't forget about storage risk, because, if I'm picking on poor canola right now, but, if we had to, harvest a later crop and it was a little bit tougher and there's some green material in it and stuff like that, there's some increased storage risk. We have to be cognizant of that, right? But another thing to throw out there, like with interest rates, is the advance payment program, or the cash advance program. We can borrow up to $250,000 interest free. This is for 2024. Normally it's 100,000. In 2024, it's 250,000. So we can borrow that interest free. We can take out a post-harvest advance on that to drive down that interest cost on the stored grain, to try to capture maybe some market rallies later on in the year. So these things are available to us. And just to round out the advance payment program discussion, there's up to $1 million available for producers. And amounts over the 250,000 interest-free ranges from prime to prime less 0.75%, depending on the commodity and who you're dealing with and the like. So there are some tools out there that allows us to remove that interest cost of 9 cents per bushel per month to be a little bit more patient for the market rallies. And I do get questions on marketing, and I think the one thing that I think the one word I use when marketing over the last couple of years is patience, because it does seem that we get hammered with bad news and funds are shorting the market, and then all of a sudden things turn around and we have a rally, and then the rally's over and then we get back to where we were before. And it's about patience and discipline to market into those rallies. So the advance payment program does give you that financial patience, if you will, by allowing you to tap into some of the value of that grain that's in storage. And the last thing is options. You know, I won't go too much into that, but that options, you know, puts calls, that's available for producers through a brokerage as well, or the grain marketer that they can look at as well. So 2025 costs of production, time to start. Within the province, we're starting to collect information and put together our 2025 crop costs of production. We're release it, it's usually later in December. So this year it's December 2024 that we're going to do it. We actually source the cost, much like how producers source the costs. We use generally accepted management practices, you know, for seeding rates and fertility and herbicide and fungicide, insecticides and the like. So we come up with those numbers. And while our numbers are a good starting point, obviously your numbers are the best numbers. So this is going to be something that we're going to be working on and chatting with Lionel when there's some more crop talks in the future through winter. We'll do an update on that as well to be able to talk about some of the changes that we've seen from 24 to 25 and some of the winners and losers on a projected basis anyways, to hopefully spur others into coming down with those numbers. Because I really think, you know, just looking at the grain prices and these stubbornly high input prices, we really need to be on top of our game for that. So that's something that's going to be coming up shortly from us. All right, so wrapping that up, I'm going to jump into AgriStability and AgriInvest. Talk very, very, very high level about the program, some of the forms that are required, and then some of the changes to the programs in 24 and 25. So AgriStability, I have a few comments on this. I think that will help a lot of folks. AgriStability protects Canadian producers from declines in farming income, things as production loss, increased costs, and market conditions, commodity prices, right? So there's been some criticism from crop producers about AgriStability and its coverage over the last handful of years. And I think we need to understand the AgriStability program. And when I talk about understanding, it's knowing about what it covers. Again, production loss, increased costs, and markets or grain prices, speaking specifically about crops. So production loss, our primary or our first line of defense would be agri insurance, crop insurance, right? So once that plays out, we really are focusing on the increased costs and the market conditions. So back in 2021, obviously there was a drought that impacted some of our producers quite severely. But those who participated in agri insurance did see a fairly large AgriStability, an agri insurance indemnity, a crop insurance payment for the production losses. And we have to remember back in 2021, the input costs were actually quite reasonable because this was right at the start of the run-up of everything, right? So I think back to urea being $400, $450 per ton, things like that. Like input prices were low coming into 21. So then we had this significant production wreck, and through COVID, through the drought and everything, we started to see a pretty significant run up in the grain prices. Now, talking to producers at that point, they felt that maybe they should have been eligible for an AgriStability payment, but we have to remember that first of all, agri insurance came in with quite large payments for some of our producers, but then also the market prices increased. So we had agri insurance payment, crop prices increasing, and relatively cheap input costs. And because of those things moving, it led to not as many AgriStability payments in the crop industry. So we move into 2022 and input costs are starting to rise, but grain prices are pretty decent. Again, depending on where you are with production is very geographically specific on how well or how bad it is, whatever the case may be. But again, there wasn't a lot of payments with AgriStability because, again, the grain price was high in 2022, moving a lot of producers out of payments. Let's fast forward to 2023, and 2023 was probably our most expensive crop to grow. So this increased cost portion was definitely significant, but we had still pretty decent market conditions. And speaking to some producers after 2023 had actually pretty decent crops. So those things, the decent crops and the high prices counteracted or offset the increased cost. Now in November 23, December 23, grain prices started to slip. So it depends on how much was sold before that, how much unpriced inventory you had, stuff like that. Some might have seen a payment in 23, but again, for those reasons, again, there weren't a lot. Let's get into 2024. And I mean, the 2024 story hasn't been completely written yet. We still have a couple months to go, but in 2024, we have stubbornly high input costs, and we've seen throughout the year, think back to the previous example, the 1475, that was an actual May price. Now we're down to 1350. We have high costs, slipping market conditions, and depending on where we go with production, and we'll see what the MASC numbers are when they come out eventually. Some people had good crops, but others had, if not bad crops, mildly disappointing crops or just underwhelming crops. So it's again, we still don't know how the story is going to be written, but there is more probability is increasing for a potential payment just based on those things. And it depends when you sold. So producers that were heavily sold before harvest. So I've talked to producers who had sold, $15 plus canola, $9+ wheat, $5 plus oats, $14 and over soybeans, because they were aggressive in their pre-harvest marketing. So they marketed, through, before seeding even and throughout the growing season. Those producers will see a little bit better returns, obviously, because of the higher grain prices as compared to now. So that might move them out of payments. It all depends, and it's very specific to each individual. As we move into 2025, depending on what these market prices do, it seems that the increased cost is still a thing. Fertilizer is still expensive when we compare it to the price of grain. There is some potential for AgriStability payments. And a bit of a sales pitch on this call is that looking at 24 and looking at what could come for 25, I think that it'd be wise for producers to look at the AgriStability program. Either those who are on the fence whether they should stay in or not, I think it would be wise to stay in, just looking at these potential issues with these three issues that AgriStability helps cover, that we're moving in the wrong way, and there could be some benefit definitely for remaining in this, at least for the next couple of years, to see how things play out. And for those who have opted out of the program, I think we should be looking at it again and looking at maybe getting back into it. And there's some dates, and I'll talk about that shortly. So that's my little sales pitch and discussion point on AgriStability. AgriInvest, most people participate in that. It's a producer government savings account. There are some changes with that for 2025, and I'll talk about that in a few slides down. So not to overwhelm anyone with forms, but this is the AgriStability form and AgriInvest form as well. There's, I think, 7 pages. I've just picked out a few. I do hear feedback from producers about, how if they're to do it on their own, there's so much data. And I do hear feedback from producers say that their accountants charge enough to do this, that's one of the reasons why some have opted out, because they felt the cost of administering it from their own perspective with their accountant is just too much for what they're getting back out of it. Producers negotiate on everything. They negotiate on equipment, they negotiate on inputs. I think producers should also negotiate with their accountants and see what where the costs are. If producers are providing information to their accountants in a way that creates a lot of work for their accountants to come up with some of this data, well, maybe there's a better way that producers can provide the information to their accountants to save a few dollars on their accountant bill. Or maybe for those that feel comfortable with numbers, they can move into doing a lot of this stuff themselves, because it is not overwhelming. It feels like that, but we're going to take a look at a few of the forms that's required and see what that is. So this is just the cover page for all the data. Where we get into some of the more detailed amount, this is the income page. The biggest thing for producers, if they're looking at trying to do this or trying to reduce their accountant costs or working with their accountants, is to give the information to the accountants in a way that they can easily take those numbers and put it into these types of things. So commodity sales is, wheat, canola, soybeans, so on and so forth, just the dollar amounts. The biggest thing is here, the codes have to match up and the dollar amounts have to match up to the income tax that's filed. So that's the biggest thing with that. So I would, again, encourage producers to work with their accountants and try to drive down their costs a little bit. Again, we're going to be looking at driving down costs on everything from seed to fertilizer to chemical for the upcoming year. Why should this be any different? Here's the expense form. I'm going to pick on one expense. There's allowables and non-allowables. We can see here allowables, non-allowables. I'm going to use labor just to kind of explain that. The program has arm's length labor and non-arm's length salaries. So we can see here arm's length salaries, and then we have non-arm's length over here. The difference is if you pay your kids and you have a hard man, the kids are non-arm's length, where the hard man would be arm's length. So we need to separate that out. So again, if we have that separated out in the information we give to the accountant, it makes it a little bit easier, hopefully a little bit cheaper. The next form here, this is really where producers have to take ownership though and fill this out and have this. But the good news is a lot of this data is already out there in some of the other programs we participate with. So when we talk about crops that we grow, so we have to, pick the crop, and let's just say we're going to use bushels or, metric tons, whatever, how many acres we grow, any unseeded acres, how much we produced. All of this is with MASC in HPR, the Harvested Production Report. So this data is already there. We've already reported it. So essentially it's transcribing it onto something like this. And then let's just assume the year end is December 31st for sake of argument. At December 31st, do an ending inventory. Most likely you're having to do that for your bank anyways. Do your ending inventory for this program, and two birds, one stone. You have that data. And then the other last things we need is if we've purchased any inputs for the next year. So say we pre-bought some fertilizer for the next year, we got to spell that out. If we have any deferred income, so deferred grain checks or whatever the case may be. And then if we have any accounts payable that we're carrying forward. So it sounds like a lot, but just break it into smaller bite-sized chunks. And for those that don't feel comfortable doing it on your own, work with your accountant, ask a few more questions, ask how they'd want the information. How can you reduce some of those costs if costs are concerned? And then look at filling this out. And we have a lot of this data. If we take ownership of it and maybe do a little bit more of the legwork, we can drive down our costs a little bit and be in a program where I think in 24 and 25, it'd be wise to be in, just considering the market conditions that we're seeing. So a few changes with AgriStability. So in 2024, there's a thing called tax line reference margins. So it always used to be accrual, but you can actually report AgriStability on the same way you're accounting your income taxes, which most are cash. So that's a nice thing that we could do that reduces some of the burden, if you will. And then they're coming out with coverage notices, which are estimations of the reference margin in the current year, just to help be a little bit more clear and transparent with where the coverages are. So a few things for important dates. So this is for the 2024 program. So the application deadline is April 30th of 25. So, you know, let's get into the program. There's time. For 2024 program year, those forms that I previously shown you, the new date without penalty is June 30th. Previously, it was September 30th. So that's a change for the 24 year. So our 24, the income expenses and accrual form needs to be done by June 30th. And there is a penalty period. It used to be December 31st. It's now September 30th. So that's the one big change on the dates with AgriStability. And that's for the 24 year, which is the year we're in right now. So those dates are all in 25. So just to be aware, those dates have moved. Those dates previously were there for a long time. So just be aware that the without penalty date's now June 30th and the with penalty date is now September 30th. So AgriInvest, I'm wrapping up on my presentation here. So starting in 2025, so this is in the future, you know, a couple of years in the future, well, it's next year, but time I report, it's actually the year after. Starting in 2025, the deadline is going to match the AgriStability deadline. So June 30th without penalty, September 30th. And notice that's 2026, right? So we're not talking about this year, we're talking about next year's program, which then has dates following. So just to kind of wrap your head around that. So these are 2025 AgriInvest changes. The big change, though, is the need for an agri-environmental risk assessment requirement, and that will be for those who have allowable net sales of $1 million or more, and that's averaged over the previous 3 program years. So there's been a lot of talk about this happening, and this is straight from the federal government's website. So what it is in 2025, those with an 3-year average of the previous 3 program years of $1 million or more of annual net sales will be required to have an eligible and valid environmental risk assessment to be able to receive the money. So here's an example down here of they're going to use 22, 23, 24 to come up with the average for the 25 year. So, you know, depending on your situation, you may trigger this or you may not, but just to be aware of it. But you know what? Fear not. This isn't as bad as what I think some fear it may be. Here's the list of risk assessments that are eligible for AgriInvest. Environmental farm plan that our department has with in partnership with Keystone Egg Producers is eligible for that, thankfully. And it's actually something that I think is it's a pretty decent program. My hat is off to the folks that produce this. I've tested it, put in some sample farms. It works really good. You can do it whenever you want. It's online. You can do it at 10 o'clock at night when you get in, and you can work away at it and save it and chip away at it. The other nice thing is this can be used for other government programming if required. So it can, again, 2 birds with 1 stone type of thing. And it's quick to get that statement of completion back once it is completed. I've talked to a number of producers who had to go through this to be eligible for different government programming. They've always been a little stressed and concerned about having to do this. They figure the undertaking is a lot bigger than what it is. And then when I talk to them afterwards, they're like, you know what, that was actually, it was a good process, and be able to, kind of go through the farm. You're passionate about the farm. You get to see things maybe from a different perspective. And it's actually a pretty decent process. So I don't think producers should be too worried about it. You can come up with, a statement of completion is good for 5 years, I believe, in pretty short order. So it's not something that I would have a whole lot of stress about. And again, this is for 2025. So we're looking, into the future with this. So so don't worry. There's some easy ways to get this, to check that box to meet that requirement and get that matching amount. Because again, looking forward into 2025, we gotta pull all the couch cushions out to find whatever changes in there, and this is something that we gotta continue to do, and it's a pretty easy process. So I don't think there should be any concerns about that. And with that, that wraps up my part of the presentation. I don't know if there's any questions, Lionel, but if someone's not comfortable asking a question, on this, there's my direct contact information. Don't be afraid to call. It's also my cell. You can text, email, whatever the case may be. If I don't know the answer, I'd be able to point you in the right direction. Just want to thank Crystal Berthlet, my farm management specialist colleague, for helping me with some of the AgriInvest stuff for all the dates and everything, doing some of that research. And on the livestock and forage side, Ben Ham, again, another colleague of mine with farm management, knows his stuff when it comes down to AgriStability and the livestock and forage side. So just a tip of the hat to those two. And yeah, so if there's any questions, Lionel, fire
Yeah,
away.
actually there is, Darren. So just leave your slides up there. When you were talking about budgets there, and you had the one line that said ownership. So what does that line mean?
That could be ownership withdrawals. It would be anything that wouldn't be captured in the operating or fixed costs. So some producers pay themselves a salary and it comes out of labor and it goes into operating, and that's fine as long as it's accounted for. Others will take money out of their farm through something like, say, land rent. If they're a corporation and they own land personally and they just charge the corporation land rent, it's accounted for in operating, that's fine. But any situation where you're taking money out that's not accounted for in any operating or any other fixed costs, you need to account for it because it is still money leaving the farm. So it might be zero for a lot of farms just because it comes out in a different way. But if it's, or if you're a sole proprietor and you don't pay yourself anything, you just take money out of the farm, that would be that amount there. So I honestly don't care where you put it, just as long as you account for it.
So that would be like your living costs then?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. When you were figuring out and you were using the 14 months for, I guess it was for interest on grain that you're selling, right?
Yes.
Okay. So if I'm figuring that out now, would I still be using the 14 months, or would I be using a different number there?
So you could use whatever number so however long you're going to sit on the grain. I was using 14 months just to show, like, if you're going to store this into next harvest, essentially is what that would be. So that might be, if you're harvesting, say you're harvesting this August, it would be October of 25 that you'd be selling, like 14 months roughly. That 14 months was just an example. Use whatever you want. Most people are probably going to use, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, 8 or 10 months, depending if they're going to sell into, say, June, July. I think that what the point is to know how much the cost of that carry is, because it is not free. Bank of Canada, I'm just looking here on my phone. I think what did the amount came down. Well, I lost it on my phone. It came down just this morning. So, prime is one thing, but you got to figure out what you're actually paying on your operating loan. So if it's, say, 7%, use 7%. No, down 0.5%. Thanks, Roy. My manager's looking out for me here. Down 0.5% this morning. So whatever your operating cost is, times it by the dollar amount divided by 12, come up with a per month cost. So I think my example is 9 cents per bushel per month. So if you're looking at 10 months out, 90 cents a bushel type thing. So whatever it is, you can figure it out. Not everybody sells all their grain, 10 months from now or 14 months from now. They sell it in chunks. But if you sell some 3 months from now, some 6 months from now, some 10 months from now, you can do that math to figure out how much more you need in each of those sales to account for that interest.
Okay, and the other question was about getting back if you had gotten out of AgriStability, if you could get back in, and I think you answered that with a couple of those slides there. So I think
Yeah, so
that-
just to maybe some clarity on that. So if you're, I think the last couple of years, you'll get enrollment notices, and if you've just been, throwing those away, you'll only get those for, I think it is 2 years, and then they'll stop sending them to you. So if you've been out of it for a little while longer, you're not receiving that. There is a form, I believe it's called the new and rejoining application form. So if you would just internet search that, Google search it, AgriStability new and rejoining application form. I think it's like a 2-pager, 3-pager, where you would fill that out, and essentially they're asking, your farm details for, GST numbers or corporation numbers or whatever the case may be, mailing address, contact people, stuff like that. And then also what you're, growing. So in a crop situation, how many acres was in, say, 2024 and all that type of stuff. It's not too bad at all. Send that in, and then you will be back into the program. They'll send you the notice, and there's some minor fees that you would have to pay, and then get into the reporting structures. So again, we can do that. We can get back into it. So I'd suggest to producers to strongly look at that, because again, some might say the storm's coming. I would say maybe the storm might already be here when we come down to this profit or this cost price squeeze that we're in. I think we got to look at everything, and that's a good thing for producers to look at least.
same advice for a livestock producer.
Yep. Well, I think for everybody, times are good in livestock. So the thing is with these programs, think of AgriInsurance with your IPI, is that when you have good years, you build coverage. And the idea is that when you have a bad year, you can then tap into that coverage for the livestock producers that have had some good years. They're building coverages now. So it's important to be in that, to be able to do that. And then, unfortunately, nothing good lasts forever. That when, times get tighter again, then you can rely on those better years margins to be able to have some coverage through the programs. And that is the good thing actually on the crop side, is that we did have some profitable years there that we had built some coverages, and we're going to need to lean on that, or we could potentially need to lean on that depending on what else happens here, but at least it's there for us.
Okay, and this one was, I was talking to a producer, and he was telling me he was pretty happy with, because of his crop insurance coverage this year actually pays him more than actually growing the crop. How does that crop insurance pricing work? Just if you could quickly go through that. So when they figure out the average price for, say, canola for next year, do you know that off the top of your head?
So this is how AgriInsurance determines the crop dollar values for the program?
Yeah.
So I'm not involved with that, but my understanding is that the administrators for AgriInsurance, with consultation with the federal Department of Agriculture, will have discussions, and they will look at forward pricing for the crop year that they're talking about. So let's say 2025. I believe those discussions usually start in December, and in Manitoba, generally egg days. So, mid January or third week of January is when they usually announce the crop dollar values. So in that time period, they will determine, what a reasonable amount is for that. And it's looking at one component of that is looking at future crop or new crop pricing, if you will.
Okay, so they don't work on a 5-year moving average or anything like that.
Not to my knowledge. I'm not I'm not in that group to decide that. So that'd probably be a better question for crop insurance or for AgriInsurance MESC folks. But my understanding, again, they're working with their other counterparts throughout the country, but mainly working with agri-food agriculture Canada to be able to come up with those values for the program.
Great, thanks, Darren. And just a comment is glad that you had mentioned about the approved risk assessments for the $1 million coverage through the AgriStability there. So
yeah, and for that again, don't get, for producers that will be have to do this, don't get too worked up or too upset about it. There's some pretty streamlined things, and maybe a lot of producers have done some of this stuff already. If they have a 4R plan or something like that, right? So and this is for 2025, so we're a little ways away from it. So yeah, it's don't fear it too much. It's all good, and we'll get through it.
Great, thanks, Darren.
Thank you.
We look forward to talking to you again, probably before the end of the year here. So thanks again. Okay, to go on with crop scouting panel, I'd like to first of all thank them for being a part of CropTalk again for the past year. They're a real important part of the whole program, whether they're presenting or answering questions. They definitely make this thing work great. So thank them again for being involved. Marla, are you on today?
No, I don't see Marla on this morning.
Okay. The one question that I did get that came up was regarding the fall deadline for fall fertilization application in Manitoba. And I think it was somebody was just wondering, I think this producer might have been wondering about manure application as well. But I'm pretty sure it's November the 10th. I will double check with Marla. Some years they do make extensions, but I think it's been a pretty good fall for putting on fertilizer. We've had a pretty open fall so far, so I think November 10th is the deadline. And if there's any changes to that, I will let you know. A few more closing slides. The Manitoba Beef and Forage Conference is going to be held on October 30th. This is going to be held in Portage. If you're looking for registrations, there is the registration and the QR code if you're wanting to register. So if you're looking at taking in the conference, there's definitely a good one to be looking at attending. Save the date for the agronomist conference. Their dates are December 11th and 12th. So that'll be coming up quicker than we think. I thought I heard yesterday or some on the news the other day, somebody said it was 9 weeks until Christmas. So we're definitely not that far away from the agronomist conference. So definitely mark down that. There's again for registration, there's the email addresses and the website as well. So if you're looking at going there, pre-registration is open. So AgX is on October the 23rd to 26th. So if you're looking at going to a great cattle show, it starts in Brandon here and starting tomorrow. So definitely take that in. The Manitoba Forage and Grassland Association has got a conference in Brandon on November 12th to the 13th. There's going to be some really good speakers here. If you're looking at some new innovations in grazing to feeding cattle, there's definitely going to be a lot of people there that have done a lot of different things. So if you're interested, there's the contact information and plan on attending. The hay listing service is still available. So if you've got hay for sale or you're looking to buy hay, should be easy to find hay to buy. But if you got bales you want to sell, you can definitely get them put on the website. Just give a 1-800 number a call and somebody will help you get everything on there. Crop residue burning program is still on. We've had quite a few days where you required permits this year, but I think today is a burning day. So if you've got some cleanup to do, definitely check the website if you need a permit or not. our crop extension specialists. That's us, and our locations and our numbers. So if you got questions regarding anything that you've heard, or questions you want to do something on your farm, or questions about production, definitely give us a call. Our livestock people, our livestock and forage specialists, again, definitely doing a lot of different meetings this time of year, and are going to be busy with your feed plans for the year. So if you've got some questions, give them a call. I mentioned this last week. I just thought I'd leave it on for one more week here. Dave Kaminsky, our pathologist, is retiring. So hopefully he's out there enjoying the day today, and maybe getting some pictures taken. And there's our MASC offices, their locations and phone numbers and 1-800 numbers. And I'd like to thank everybody for helping make CropTalk a success this year. Join us for winter Crop Talks. As I mentioned a couple times, we'll probably be having a few before the end of the year. And join us at Ag Days. We'll be having a Crop Talk again at Ag Days this year. So if you're wanting to meet some of the people that are on our crop scouting panel, they'll be on the agenda there for the day. So if you've got some questions, please join us on Ag Days. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for attending. I'd like to thank Lori for helping getting everything organized every week, Lori and Aaron. And again, thanks, and we'll see you during the winter.